I've been looking forward to this conversation all week long, even more so after last night, because our next guest has been an ally of those of us pushing Connor Hellebuyck for Hart, and has been someone that has recognized just how good this Winnipeg Jets team has been all year long. Craig Button from TSN joins us now. And Craig, great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for doing this. It has been a fun few days here in Winnipeg. I mean, coming in, knowing what the St. Louis Blues have been up to, and the Dallas Stars waiting at home on Thursday, I'm not sure the Winnipeg Jets could have done anything more to let the rest of the NHL know that this team means business, and they're going to be a tough outcome playoff time.
Yeah, no question about it. And, it was interesting because after that game in Utah last Saturday night, I was like, oh, come on. Like, seriously, are you going to create more doubt for everybody that wants to be in a situation? Sorry about that. You want to create more doubt for everybody with respect to how you play. And then, the big game against St. Louis on Monday, because the game on Monday was leading into Thursday night's game against Dallas. They don't beat St. Louis, and boy, it now becomes like, it's a little bit tight collar time. And great game against the St. Louis Blues. And like the game a couple of weeks ago in Winnipeg versus Dallas, I'm going to quote my dear friend Ken Hitchcock. Game was too rich for the Dallas Stars. Too rich. And that's what the Winnipeg Jets have been able to do. I appreciate your introduction. My job is to try to offer perspective, offer opinion, but also make sure that it's valid. I don't know how anybody can say that Connor Hellebuyck is the Hart Trophy winner is not valid. I don't know how anybody can say that the Winnipeg Jets is a serious Stanley Cup contender is not valid. There's fandom, but then there's reality. There has been no better team in the National Hockey League over the last 161 regular season games than the Winnipeg Jets. There's been no goaltender better than Connor Hellebuyck. Maybe no better player in the last 161 regular season games, not that he's played them all, than Connor Hellebuyck. So you watch, you see, you look at different areas, you look at data, you look at the eye test. This is a really strong Winnipeg Jets team. And what has everybody been waiting for, Hustler? Everybody's been waiting for the playoffs to begin so that they can get that bad taste of last year's series out of their mouth. And I don't have any doubt that they will.
Well, and we've been, obviously looking forward to the playoffs, knowing this was a playoff team. But Craig, there has been there was a big carrot to winning the Central Division. The fact of the matter is this is the best division in hockey. You've got 3 of the top 5 or 6 teams in the league in your top 3. And considering what happened in the playoffs, I think the Jets would be more than happy to let Dallas and Colorado go at it for 2 weeks and see who survives, and hopefully make it through their through their round, and then see who the Kings of the Central are. But man, the way that they did it, Monday night, first off, because listen, as great as the game against Vegas was, the 4-0 shutout, it was a very disappointing first 40 minutes. Scott Arniel said as much. That did not look like the team that won in Vegas. And then you have 6 periods of dominant hockey against top teams in the NHL. Like, what impressed you the most about these last 2 wins? Knowing the stakes, what they were trying to accomplish, and the opposition that they were facing.
Yeah, well, the opposition, we know how strong it was, right? So I don't think there's any question that, facing strong competition. To me, it was the way they stifled those teams. It was the way that they said, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to show that you're better than us. You're going to have to push us back. You're going to have to push us out of what we're trying to do. St. Louis Blues were better than the Dallas Stars, but not by much. St. Louis Blues hung in there. They played pretty good, like in terms of staying in the game. But once the Winnipeg Jets pushed the game up to a higher level, that's why I used the Ken Hitchcock quote. It was too rich. Like, you can think it was 2-0 after the second period versus Dallas. Dallas wasn't in that game, just like they weren't in the game in Winnipeg. St. Louis, yeah, they was even until the third period, but it wasn't really as close as the scoreboard indicated. And there was no, to me, there was no real significant time in those two games where you looked like, oh boy, the opponent has the Jets tipped over a little bit. They have them a little bit on edge. Let's see what they can do. And I use the term 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It didn't matter who was coming out on the ice for the Winnipeg Jets. The opponent had no answer for them. And, you think about Niederreiter scoring the first goal versus Dallas, Morgan Barron scoring the second goal against Dallas. Yeah, Kyle Connor, you expect that from him. But that's why I use the 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a deep team. It's a hard team. The playoffs are about who can go to the hardest, the longest. Winnipeg Jets have shown that. And I know last year they rolled into the playoffs. But let me ask you this question. A top defensive team last year in the National Hockey League, number one in goals against with the top goaltender. Tell me one person, just name one person anywhere on the planet that said the Jets are going to get caved in defensively. It was a bad 8 days. That's all it was. I've seen that happen before. And just because you have a bad 5 games doesn't mean that that's going to repeat itself. I think the Jets have come back this year with a real resolve. And you got to go through 82 to get to game 1 of the playoffs. I think this team now knows sharpening the saw is something that's really important. I don't think they're going to have any defensive wobbles when the playoffs begin.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, Craig, because I think, to touch on two things. I mean, the failure in the playoffs last year when they had a very ugly 8 days, probably as ugly as they had at any point during the regular season, was a bitter pill to swallow for the fan base, but also for the players. And, they owned that this year. I mean, they weren't running from it. They knew they had to be better, and they've seemed to be focused on doing everything they can to be more consistent throughout the year. And like maybe the best example of that just from last night was what they did to Dallas in the third period. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, just natural. I mean, the way the team played in the first 40 and you're up 2-0, you're thinking, okay, here comes the big push from the Dallas Stars. I said to Reem at the start of the show, if you just said, oh yeah, one of these teams is up 2-0 and these are the stakes for the game and watch the third period, you would have thought it was the Jets that were down 2-0 to Dallas. They absolutely owned them. And it was like Dallas almost put up the white flag. So, I mean, they know that the job is not done until that final buzzer goes. And, kind of put that on a season scope. It's like these last couple games this week against St. Louis and Dallas are like that of the regular season where they're pushing right to the end to finish the job. And then, of course, be ready to start a whole nother journey next week when everyone resets to 0 with 16 teams in the tournament.
Exactly. But again, the playoffs, the margins are thinner. The 16 worst teams are knocked out. They're done. They're finished. They're on to next year. So the 16 teams left are good. That like you don't. Daryl Sutter said this many times, as have other coaches. It's hard to make the playoffs in the National Hockey League. Now you start the playoffs. Teams are good. They're trying to hold. They're trying to, get their game in order. And that's why it's so important when you watch what the Winnipeg Jets are doing against really good competition, is that they're sharpening that saw. It's last year it felt like they were winning, but there was still some gaps in their game, and not big gaps. I'm not going to suggest that there were big gaps or where I would say I had concerns, and I don't see those gaps this year. And again, when I say 1, 2, 3, 4, and the way they buried the Dallas Stars. I mean, in Dallas, this is a team that's fighting for the President's Trophy, fighting for first place in their division, considered a Stanley Cup favorite. They were booed. They were booed in their own building. And that's coming off of the debacle against the Vancouver Canucks in the last minute. And if you go and look, and I'll send you the data. Since the Four Nations break, the Dallas Stars have been one of the worst defensive teams in the National Hockey League. Now we can look at Heiskanen and go, yeah, that's a big loss. No kidding. But the Winnipeg Jets didn't have Dave Velarde last night. They didn't have Dave Velarde on Monday night, who's a real key figure on this team. But think about that. One of the worst teams in the entire 32-team league since the Four Nations break last floor. That's not a Stanley Cup contender.
No, and on the other side of that data is right at the top. I mean, the best team in 5-on-5 is the Winnipeg Jets, and that I think maybe caught some people off guard or was surprised because there's been a couple losses in there. But I mean, really, from the 15-1 start, to their credit, they never laid off the gas, and if anything, they're playing better right now. And like, I know we remember the 7-0 win in Colorado in Game 81 last year that, justifiably had everybody so excited and that we knew what happened. Craig, you've been involved in team building, involved in teams. One of the themes that I think we've taken from the Winnipeg Jets is that they're owning what happened in the last two playoffs. I mean, there was the Bones explosion after Vegas and the no-show in Game 5, and then what happened in Colorado. There's a lot of teams with championship pedigree that went through some really tough losses, some poor play, some major disappointments, and it forged them into the team that made them champions. Are you seeing that same sort of response to the last two seasons in the Winnipeg Jets? And how much a part of, do you think, owning it the way they did and their commitment to being better has made the team we're talking about sniffing around for that number one overall spot of 32 teams?
Yeah, I've seen exactly what you just laid out. And now the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that, okay, this is where we fell short. I'll go back to the series a couple of years ago. They won Game 1. They were up 2-0 going into the third period against Vegas. They lost. Came back for Game 3. They lost Josh Morrissey. I mean, you're losing your best defense, one of the best. They lose in double overtime. Okay, so it's slid after that. Okay, and Rick Bowness, made his comments and whatever they were. But you learn from that. You also learn from last year, and the playoffs are about treating every single play as critically important, because you don't know which play will ultimately be the critical play. You don't know that. So that's why when I use the term sharpen the saw, every player has to go out and say, this is what we're doing. That winning that puck right there, getting that puck out or getting that puck in right there matters. Because when plays turn around on you, you can point back to one thing that didn't happen. Now, you're not going to play a mistake-free game. But when you treat everything as critically important and every play is critically important, that's sharpening the saw. What did Wayne Gretzky famously say after losing 4 straight, the Stanley Cup final, the New York Islanders in '83? He said, I walked past their locker room and I said, oh boy, that's what the price is to pay. Now keep in mind, this is the 4th straight Stanley Cup for the New York Islanders. They knew what that price was. But you talk about learning. I mean, that great Edmonton Oilers group had to learn. And to me, the first thing you acknowledge is, oh, it's a little bit harder than I thought. Oh, it's going to take a little bit more than I thought. If winning was easy, everybody would do it. It's hard. It's hard to be dialed in for every single shift you're out on the ice. It's hard to be dialed in for all those games in the playoffs. But if you want to be crowned champions, that's simply what it takes.
If you want to win, especially in the playoffs, you need contributions from everybody. And you mentioned the name Morgan Barron earlier. Barron, it's interesting, and it's important to note, he was hurt last year in the playoffs, and I'm not sure. I mean, Morgan Barron wouldn't have been the difference in that series. However, he's been like a revelation since post-deadline, moving over to center, Craig. Just your thoughts on the look of that fourth line and really the bottom 6, if you want to include what the Lowry line has been doing for the last number of years and how important that is. I mean, the combination of Brandon Tanev and now Jared Anderson-Dolan's in the mix. I mean, he's been hitting everything and finishing all of his checks. Just your thoughts on the playoff readiness of the bottom 6 of the Jets, and in particular, Morgan Barron's impact recently with the speed and the size he has playing in the middle on the fourth line.
Yeah, you nailed it. Speed and size, and he's a competitor. So he does. A lot of players have speed and size, but they don't impose themselves. They don't initiate. I mean, that goal he scored. He scored a goal against St. Louis, which was pretty significant. Very similar type play to the one he scored versus
almost the same goal.
Yeah, but he's a player that says, "Stop me, stop me. I'm not stopping myself. So what are you going to do to stop me?" And I think that that's the attitude that Morgan Barron possesses. I think that's the attitude the Winnipeg Jets have shown that they possess. And I think it's an important thing to possess going into the playoffs. But you talk about Morgan Barron, you talk about Brandon Tanev. I mean, Brandon Tanev is disruptive. He's disruptive. And you're sitting on the bench and you know you're going out against Brandon Tanev. It's no fun. Because there's no chance to relax. There's no chance for a mental rest, let alone a physical one when those guys are out there. And for Scott Arniel to have options. Like, I talked earlier about Gabe Vilardi. Gabe Vilardi was a mainstay, a really, really important figure on that top line with Scheifele and Connor. And now Alex Iafallo just steps up there and has really stepped into a real significant contributing role there. Then you have other players. I mean, Gustafsson had some really good stretches. We know what Kupari can do. And really what I'm speaking to here is depth. Depth. You need depth. You can't have too few players that leave you short on your in the areas of your team. Yeah, the Jets have tons of skill. Yeah, they have lots of skill, but they have depth. Neil Pionk comes back in the lineup. Now you got Luke Schenn playing in different areas, and now he's not extended. And you start to look at everything that the Winnipeg Jets have in terms of building out their team. And credit to Kevin Cheveldayoff and the management group, because I know everybody talked, and then me at times too, I'm not going to exclude me from this, about the second line. And I didn't think they necessarily needed a second line center as much as they needed a little more weight on that second line. But now I'm watching, I'm going, probably not. I think that line has shown enough because they have enough backing. The Lowry line, which arguably is the best third line in hockey, now the fourth line with Barron and whoever's going to play on that line with Tanev, there's depth there, and there's weight, and there's speed, and that's how you grind down teams. That's how you grind them down. And winning teams have those types of players. That's what you need to go the hardest, the longest. The Jets have it.
Well, and listen, Scott Arniel hopefully is going to have good problems with a full array of healthy players. I mean, if Gabe Vilardi comes back, I assume you're going to crank him back to where he's normally been. But I'll tell you what, Craig, I mean, the contributions of Alex Iafallo on that top line in the spot of Gabe Vilardi, he probably doesn't have the offensive pop that Vilardi does, but he does so many other things that kind of scream playoffs. And whether they put him back with Barron and like a Tanev on a fourth line, that would be, I mean, no disrespect to Dolan, Anderson Dolan, because he's been really good, or whoever else has been there. But it gives Arniel some real options. And in particular, Iafallo is a player that I think if a guy goes down, I mean, you'd feel comfortable with him playing on any one of your four lines at the playoffs because of what he's able to do defensively, 200 foot, and then also add something offensively when he's playing with top players.
There's no question about it. And I think that we all run into this problem. And when I say problem, it's not a problem. We see what Jared Anderson Dolan has done. What Kupari has done, Gustafsson, and we go, oh yeah, no. And it's really simply about having more options and an ability for a coach to have more players at his disposal. Good teams have that. Good players are going to have players that jump in times of need. They're going to have to swing players around the lineup. And I think that's one of the things about what Kevin has been able to do. Alex Iafallo, to me, is an incredibly valuable player. Tanev is an incredibly valuable player. Niederreiter, an incredibly valuable player because of their flexibility. Morgan Barron is showing that now because on the wing, now he can play in the middle. When you're faced and you're going to play one team in a playoff round, and they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we stop what they do well? How do you try to overcome what the other opponent is doing to you? And you have all these tools, really good tools at your disposal that you can use and mix it up and switch it around so that you don't lose your advantages. That to me is a coach's dream. And I think that Scott Arniel has that coach's dream with the lineup that he has. And he's got the skill, he's got the size. I think the second line has shown they can be really, really important. And at the same time, if the game gets a little bit too heavy at times, he doesn't have to use them as much. Why? because he's got a third and fourth line that can go out and do some heavy lifting and take some of that burden off. And that's all good. If one line's going to offset another line, well, if you got to find a way where another line can come out and do it. I think Winnipeg's third and fourth lines can overpower and outman anybody in the Western Conference. Anybody in the Western Conference. And maybe outside of Washington, where I think that they're an equal, that's the only other team that I think matches them right now.
TSN's Craig Button with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. You mentioned Luke Schenn. Just thoughts on the presence that he's added to the Jet blue line and how much more ready their unit is for playoff hockey now that big number 5's on the blue line.
Luke Schenn's in it to win it. Simple as that. I mean, I'm trying to think who did he bury last night along the boards? It was Mason Marchment.
I mean, Mason
Marchment, who's a good, competitive, hard-nosed player. He made a little turn, and Luke just buried him. Luke just said, and what Luke does is he's like that dripping water that erodes your spirit. He erodes your spirit because he knows that the first shift of a game against Dallas, the situation, he's going to bury you. Because what he wants to do is kill your spirit. He wants to make you less inclined to compete. And that's what, listen, we talk about hockey being a wonderful game, and it is. It's a competition. And Luke Schenn is a big-time competitor who cares about one thing. What do I have to do to help my team win? And he's going to do that. And I think that it was a fabulous signing or trade. I think that it probably took him a little bit of time to get up to speed in terms of the way the Jets want to play and the pace that they play at. But he looks right now like he's right up to that speed. I mean, that goal that Connor scored, the third goal, I mean, that all started with Luke Schenn. And again, seeing that quickness and seeing that ability to just it's not about can he play at that pace, it's just getting up to that pace. And I think he's there now. But ask any player if they want to play against Luke Schenn. And I want to hear who's raising their hand and go, yeah, me, because I don't think there is.
Well, I mean, and there was one play in the, and again, it was a little bit difficult to see the entirety of it on television, but I remember the Jets were breaking out. This is, I think, sort of late in the first period, and they had the wide shot, and Schenn is still going at it with Jamie Benn in front of the net. I mean, like, there's no easy ice when number 5 is on right now. And it was interesting to see when we came out at the trade deadline with 8 healthy defensemen and Schenn in on the right side, they started off with Hayden Fleury. And then, of course, Pionk got injured, so Schenn moved up with Samberg. Last night, with the complement of defensemen, they actually went for the first time to a Stanley Schenn pairing. And I think there was some nerves that, while those guys are certainly big and bring a lot to it, that might be a pairing that lacked a little bit of the foot speed at times to potentially get burned. Certainly didn't look that way last night. If everyone's healthy, do you think that is the third pairing, or do you think Fleury and Schenn is a better fit, if you will, come playoff time?
Well, we talk about depth again, right? And depth now becomes a case where you can look at it. Okay, is it a little bit too much for somebody? So I got an option now. Hayden's a great skater, and I think Hayden's play has given them some really good play. Do you have to play them every game? No. If they're playing well, yeah, you can. But again, watching how a game unfolds, watching where a team is trying to exploit where they think they might have an opportunity, that's where Scott O'Neill and the coaching staff have options. And you get those options by recognizing, okay, what type of player fits? I've talked about Hayden in this before. I mean, Hayden's an excellent skater. He competes. And now you get a player that can fit into your group. You're not just adding a player. You're adding a player that can fit into your group. I want to make, you made the comment about Jamie Benn. Trust me, Jamie Benn knows who the heartbeat players are. And he knows what Luke Schenn is all about. Jamie Benn battling Luke Schenn, that's no accident. That's Jamie Benn saying, okay, here's what you guys need to do. And I'm going to battle. And couple years ago in that playoff series with Calgary and Dallas in the first round, which was fantastic. Daryl Sutter, he recognized who the heartbeat of the Dallas Stars was, and it was Jamie Benn. And he said, "I'm going right head to head here. I'm making sure that Jamie Benn doesn't get his way with us." And Jamie Benn is a guy that's going to say, "Okay, Mr. Schenn, I'll stand up to you. I'm going to battle with you." Problem for Jamie Benn and the Stars, or not for Jamie, but for Peter DeBoer and the Stars, was not too many people were ready to follow his lead.
Craig, before we go, you've been riding with me on this for a while. With the final 3 games of the season, Connor Hellebuyck, 45 wins, only 12 losses in regulation, 8 shutouts. With the shutout last night, his goals against average is under 2 at 1.99, and he leads the league at a .925 save percentage. Is this enough to overcome the bias against goalies? Oh, and by the way, he's led his team to being the number 1 team in the league. Is this enough to overcome the bias against goalies and win the Hart Trophy as the MVP?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a voter. He has my first place vote. I can tell you that right now. And our votes are public. So you'll see, you can say, "Craig, you were true to your word," because I'm not hiding it. What he is doing hasn't been done in 40 years. Last time it was done was in 85-86, leading the league in goals against average, save percentage, wins, and shutouts. And prior to that, it had been done in the 70s. And the 3, like Bod Froese was the guy with the Philadelphia Flyers that did it in 85-86. Prior to that, it was Bernie Perrant, Ken Dryden, and Jacques Plante somewhere in the 50s. This is not something that is commonplace. And when we see somebody approaching 70 goals, we see somebody get 100 assists, we get all excited and go, "Wow, what an unbelievable year." What Connor Hellebuyck is doing is every bit as incredible as somebody getting near 70 goals or getting 100 assists or 100 points for a defenseman. Everything he is doing deserves consideration, and in my play, the first place vote, because it's not common. This is not something that happens every year. I know that there's other players that have been really valuable to their teams and have had really terrific seasons. This hasn't happened in 40 years. 40 years and 40 seasons. So we're now talking 39 seasons, because there was a lockout in there where we didn't play. So 40 years hasn't been done. And now you're going to have this bias. I was exchanging some notes with somebody today, and he talked about, he goes, "Well, look, Quinn Hughes has played as many games as Connor Hellebuyck." I said, "Yeah, and Connor Hellebuyck's played more minutes than anybody in the league." Like, you're a goaltender, you got to play all 60, don't you? The skaters get to go off for half the game, right? And you got to stay dialed in. So, for every argument against the goalie only playing, like, think about it. He's only played 60 games. Yeah, right. Yeah. And all he's done is beat every team and had a goals against average. I think it's absolutely phenomenal what he's doing. There's no way that you can dismiss Connor Hellebuyck's season this year as heart-worthy.
No, I'm 100% with you. And I really did think, just thinking of the voters, that the Jets were going to have to finish the job, win the Central, win the West, and potentially the President's Trophy for them to actually accept Hellebuyck and the Winnipeg Jets as that team and this guy as the MVP. And, going into the final 3 games, now that they're all but clinched of certainly the West, I think the scales have moved a little bit towards the goalie here in Winnipeg. Hey, Craig, just quickly on the way out, any thoughts on a matchup potentially between the Jets and Minnesota now that they've got Eriksson, Ek, and Kaprizov back, or St. Louis? I mean, I think popular opinion would have been you wanted Minnesota a week ago, but then seeing the way the Jets handled St. Louis in a big game on Monday night, and then knowing what Minnesota's coming back, I'm kind of back in the middle on this. I mean, any thoughts on it?
What I would say is, and I said this about 10 days ago, the Jets were playing, and somebody asked me, how important is it for them to finish in first and not have to face Colorado at that time? And I said, I've changed my thinking a little bit, and it dovetails right into what you just asked me. I've changed my thinking a little bit, because I don't think there's any team that the Jets can't beat. Yeah. Will some team pose a little bit more of a challenge if you got Nate McKinnon and Cale Makar? But they've shown me, like, with no doubt in my mind this year, that they can beat anybody, anywhere, anytime. And I think that's where I talk about sharpening your saw, get your game in order. That's what I see. So, you beat the St. Louis Blues, you beat Colorado, you beat Dallas, you beat Vegas. Like, I mean, they're not playing Utah, so they don't have to worry about, their most recent loss. They're not playing Columbus, who I saw them lose at home. And you're going to have games like that. But I just see a team that's ready to take on all challengers. And I know when I was in Dallas and we had some epic series versus the Edmonton Oilers. They weren't as good as us, but they were competitive and they were hard and they had nothing to lose. So any team playing the Winnipeg Jets in the first round, it'll be hard. They'll feel they have nothing to lose. But those series that we had against the Edmonton Oilers and we lost one, but they helped us. They helped us understand that the games were going to be hard, and they helped us build over the course of time. And I think that for the Winnipeg Jets, the same thing applies here. So when you're as good a team as the Winnipeg Jets, bring it on. We're ready to take anybody on. And let me just add one more thing too. The Winnipeg Jets are going to have 2 first-team All-Star players on the NHL end of season All-Star team. Connor Hellebuyck in net and Kyle Connor on left wing. Those 2 guys. Like, think about that. They might have why wouldn't Scott Armiel be the Adams Trophy winner? Adam Lowry is going to be a top 5 Selke guy. Morrissey should be a top 5 Norris guy. This is pretty incredible. And I haven't even mentioned Mark Scheifele, who's had a strong season. Like, this is a good team, Hustler. And I think that as much as everybody's chomping at the bit, and I mean, there's probably some people with doubts. That's okay. I think that to your point earlier, what you talked about, I think the Jets are ready to address those doubters and show that they're real.